What's the one horror movie that genuinely terrified you while watching it? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. The Strangers. The characters pissed me off the whole time. First of all, don't split up. Also, turn on the lights. Then grab the guns, camp out in the middle of the house, and wait for the killers to either leave or come for you, then blow their brains out. I scrolled way down waiting to see this one. I've seen that movie too many times and every time it fills me with rage. From the beginning it's just entirely unrealistic. Somebody knocking on my door at 4 a.m. I'm calling the law. I'm a smoker too. I never run out of smokes randomly, I buy them at the same time every 2 days. Even if I did, I wouldn't stay in that house alone where some girl had already been acting weird knocking on the door. Even if I somehow was stupid enough to fall into this dumbass trap, nothing about the rest of it would have remained the same. She didn't even try to fight at any point. The house was full of objects that could have been used as weapons and she just floundered around and let herself get captured. Story 2. Don't be afraid of the dark. Those things are 6 inches tall. All you need is a golf club or hockey stick, and one of those LED headlamps that last 1,000 hours. That movie was good if you turned your brains off, like you should for most horror movies really. Those creatures were inconsistent, enough strength to break those legs, but get killed by a little kid minutes later. And resealing that ash pit makes no sense. People now know there are hostile intelligent non-human creatures in a confined area. Either some shady agency would swoop in to research them, or you could just throw a couple of grenades down the hole and be done with it. Resealing, it makes no sense. You break it open, you get enough people with serious firepower and you either capture or kill every last one of them. Story 3. I remember I first saw this when I was 5 and it came on TV after something harmless that I was watching. I was having lunch, my grandmother had gone out back to work in the garden or something, thinking I was still watching Pinwheel or whatever. I don't know if I had nightmares or not afterward, but what I did see of the movie was definitely burned into my brain and I'm pretty sure I ended up running outside crying. I think the scene that finally got me was when one of them grabs a door handle. And then it makes an eye form on the inside of their hand and they have to stab it with a knife because it's telling the little dudes where they're at. Story 4. Hear me out on this one. Jeepers Creepers, the first one of course. The first 45 minutes of that film were incredible and downright terrifying anxiety. Unfortunately it turned into a B-movie at the end, but I'll never forget watching it at the cinema. I was gripped. This was mine as well. It is ultimately a bad movie, but it's a terrifying idea. First of all, I thought Justin Long was so incredibly attractive and I was traumatized by the ending. Second, you can't kill that thing. It literally hunts you and fixates for reasons you won't understand. Could be hunting you, or it could be hunting your mother, brother, husband, whoever, and you wouldn't be able to stop it. I also watched it at 13 years old. Bad time. Story 5. This was mine as well. It is ultimately an awful movie, but it's a terrifying idea. First of all, I thought Justin Long was so incredibly attractive and I was traumatized by the ending. I just love how after watching the old cruise log the guy goes, "We're leaving. Screw this ship." It makes it terrifying because that's exactly what an average person would say in real life. Kind of relevant, in the video game Outlast during the beginning there's a Spec Ops guy impaled on a pole. With his last breath he says, "You gotta get thee out of this terrible place." The no-nonsense simple expression from a guy trained for that stuff makes it so terrifying. Story 6. I was 19 when the others came out and a manager at a tiny, old movie theater. We had to build the movies upstairs in the projection booth then watch them to make sure they turned out okay. Imagine being a young female and watching that movie with only one other girl in a really old building. I was terrified when it started brain wrapping right at the jump scare and we had to go stop it and reset. I ended up calling my boyfriend to come down and sit with us. I love the way most of the jump scares turn out to be completely innocent, it's been ages since I saw it, but IRC, there's quite a lot of stuff like a hand suddenly reaching out that turns out to be a normal non-creepy statue. Somehow I found that to be way scarier than actual monsters. Story 7. It's not even that scary, but The Exorcism of Emily Rose, it may have been the based on true story part that did me. After a month of watching that movie, I started to wake up around 3 a.m., actually pretty precisely at 3 a.m., and that was nerve-wracking on top of my continuous nightmares. Those weren't because of the movie, I've always had them. And again, not so scary, but the Bloody Mary episode of Supernatural, which I think is one of genuinely scary episodes they have done. I watched it around 11 p.m. and when that girl said, "Blood Mary," a door in my house closed with a bang. I was alone. It was most likely the wind, but still. Yup, did not sleep that night, and did not look at the mirror for a while after that. Story 8. Fire in the Sky. When I was little, I became addicted to stories about alien abductions. There were no shortage of library books on the subject, and I pretty much ate it all up. Gave me nightmares, but it felt like a thrilling and frightening new frontier. I kind of got over it by the time I was 10. So, I was like 15 or 16 when Fire in the Sky came out, and having already read the Travis Walton story, I went and saw it in the theaters. I was not ready for that movie. I think I nearly hyperventilate during the big scene. Story 9. When I was little, my father would fall asleep on the sofa and leave TNT or AMC on, and they would show horror movies. I was maybe 4 or 5 and watched Nightmare on Elm Street. The scene where young Johnny Depp got pulled through a bed gave me nightmares for weeks. My stepdad used to rent Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th, all the sequels, and any other horror movie that caught his fancy and have us kids watch them with all the lights off. Used to scare the holy out of me, and then he'd top it off by hiding in a dark room and grabbing me while I walked back from the bathroom or some such. If anything, it left me jaded. Horror movies just annoy me these days, but I totally understand where you're coming from, because watching the Nightmare on Elm Street movies as a kid scared 7 shades of bad out of me. Story 10. When I was a kid around 8 to 9, I watched the black and white Night of the Living Dead. Terrified me. I would get scared from that point on for just about anything. When I was 13, my dad apparently had had enough. Took me and my 8-year-old sister to see Friday the 13th Part 3, in 3D. I'm not sure what happened, but halfway through, I wasn't scared anymore. He did a great job explaining movies and whatnot, and had seen the movie before, so we were warned about the scary parts and whatnot. Since then, I've never been scared of movies anymore. At least none of the slasher-style movies. Story 11. I don't know if it's the most terrifying movie I've seen, but Bone Tomahawk is easily one of the most visually disturbing. I went in thinking it was going to be a straight western, then it took a sharp turn into The Hills Have Eyes territory. But worse. So much worse. One scene in particular really stuck with my, unfortunately. The last house on the left, the original, was also extremely disturbing. It has a real snuff film vibe to it that made it very hard to watch. And Candyman deserves a mention as well. That movie is super creepy with a really messed up story. Story 12. The Shining has a special disturbing element to it that has never fully let me go. Even though I've probably watched it upwards of 30 times, it still makes me feel just as on edge as the first time I watched it. Edit, I my first silver. Thanks bro. When I was in my early teens, my mom and sisters worked at a convenience store, and would bring home convenience store food and rental movies pretty regularly. One time my sister was supposed to throw out a whole bunch of chopped chicken that was past the expiration date, but instead she brought it home, thinking she could make it into something instead of wasting it. She also brought home The Shining. So that day, a few hours after eating a meal prepared with expired chicken, I watched The Shining for the first time. And as the movie progressed, I felt this overwhelming feeling of unease creeping over me that I attributed to the movie. It wasn't until a few hours later that I realized I was sick from eating expired chicken. But man, you haven't seen The Shining until you've seen it with a developing case of food poisoning. Everything is just so carefully, intentionally done to create a feeling of discomfort. For example, the layout of the hotel is impossible, supernatural. In the intro scene, the manager's room has a window looking out into the lobby, however the lobby shots never include this window. During the tricycle scenes, some hallways shouldn't exist, lead where they lead. The conversation in the restroom between Jack and the lumberjack who killed his family was amazing. It goes from a normal friendly conversation to Jack suddenly stating, "I know who you are." The guy who killed his wife and daughters with an axe. Major chills there, so unexpected. Another odd detail was Wendy seeing the two people in costumes doing a blowjob. Not only is it scary that she's seeing these supernatural ghosts too, it was just really bizarre. Why the masks? Why the blowjob? These were just some, of course, there's countless more. Probably my favorite horror movie of all time. Kubrick is a genius. The atmosphere of the hotel was terrifying, the acting was superb, and the soundtrack shouldn't be ignored as well. Story 13. I think Hereditary already deserves a spot on one of the scariest movies. Everything following that scene is an excruciating descent into unbreakable grief that you know will destroy you. The brilliant thing about Hereditary is that it's a supernatural movie based on real existential fears that people actually have. Mental illness, abuse, neglect, grief, unimaginable grief. What if your family really hates you? What if you lose someone you love? What if it's your fault? What if your whole life is a lie? All these things that haunt us in our deepest, darkest corners of our brain. All expressed through what I think we all thought beforehand was going to be a routine haunting movie. While I've seen a fair amount of terrifying movies, The Conjuring, Sinister, Vivitch, It Follows, etc., most of them left me fairly unshaken after the credits rolled. But Hereditary. That film hit me hard. My partner and I had to go outside for a walk after that film. We just sort of stumbled around town for an hour, dazed and traumatized. I love it. I will probably never watch it again, but I loved every second of that horrible nightmare. Not often a movie manages to do that. Story 14. The original black and white The Haunting still gives me chills when the ghosts bang on the doors and walls, and in one scene two actresses share a bed and they hold hands in fear. One of them wakes after a while and witnesses an event, and when she complains her hand is being squeezed too tight to the other actress, the other woman turns the light on and she is actually laid on a chaise longue across the room with her hand out and clearly being squeezed by nothing that can be seen. The cinematography is great and it has different unusual camera angles to create a suspense. Another film is Dead Silence, the scene in the room with dummies in a cabinet and a clown in the rocking chair that starts talking, or in the graveyard when he has buried Billy but the dummy is actually outside his car, are truly a check my shorts moment. Story 15. Well, I scrolled down really far and I didn't find it. 28 days later there was a horrible realness to the film that gave me the shakes. The setting in the UK made everything very familiar and the infected were horrible. Gave me nightmares about being holed up in a tower block. I guess it's because it's also within the realm of possibility. Bringing the dead back is pretty impossible, infecting people with a virus that makes them crazy and violent isn't. Also, the infected aren't the only thing to worry about, other people might be dangerous too. I don't think I was scared like I would be watching a slasher movie, it was more like a constant feeling of dread. I think it's why I don't like playing games like DayZ. It's not scary, but the tension is too much. You're just out looking for supplies and a zombie spots you, and then you're running across a town with 10 of them chasing you. This one's definitely up there for me, as well. I think it's the fact that the zombies infected can run, which is something we generally don't see in other zombie movies. You're just so screwed in that scenario, and it's horrifying to realize they've just been quarantined and left to die, while their own government bombs the cities. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below.